I was assigned to cover it by the Philadelphia Inquirer, and after I became immersed in the story, I concluded it would be a really good book. I learned about it from a newspaper account. I came into it after the judges had been indicted. The idea of zero tolerance, where judges kind of get tough with kids. The policy of the judges up there was any offense committed in school automatically got you sent away. And so that's why you had kids not showing up for school. There are certainly some kids who need to be, if just to protect society. But as far as shoplifters and drug abuse and alcohol abuse and those things, those are not things that are appropriate to send kids into detention for.
I think it was the greed that it represented and the fact that it was happening to kids. We hear stories all the time about bribery of public officials, not to the amount of money, of course, that happened here, but the fact that the greed was practiced on the backs of kids was something that I think really deeply offended us. The Cash for Kids story is a story about two judges in Luzerne County who accepted about $2.9 million in fees from both a private real estate developer in Luzerne County who had built two for-profit juvenile detention facilities, one in the eastern part of the state and one in western Pennsylvania, as well as from the former co-owner of these detention centers. And they accepted this money, they concealed it. They did not report it to either state or federal taxing authorities. They didn't report it to the Judicial Conduct Board, and obviously failed to pay taxes on it. While they accepted that money, one of the judges was presiding in juvenile court for a period of 5 years and adjudicating cases of kids, hearing cases of kids, some of whom he sent to these facilities that were owned by the former co-owner. So there was a clear conflict of interest. And as well as this conflict of interest, there was also an ongoing violation of the kids' constitutional rights. More than half of these kids appeared without lawyers in front of Judge Civavarella. They have a constitutional right to a lawyer when they are charged with crimes. They've had that right for over 40 years in the United States, but that right was ignored by Civavarella. And so, to me, and I think it's important for people to understand that there were really two pieces to the Luzerne County judicial corruption scandal. One piece was the money, and one piece was the violations of the kids' constitutional rights inside the courtroom. I think that the effects of what happened to their children was profound at the time, and in many cases it's lasting. This story is not that old. There are some kids who appeared before Civavarella 6 years ago, in 2008, the last group of kids who appeared in front of this judge. They are still struggling, many of them. They are still confronting challenges in order to get back into some kind of an educational program or employment training program, figuring out how to reintegrate themselves into their communities. There's a kind of social and psychological, educational disruption that occurs when kids are torn from their families, pulled out of their home communities, pulled out of their community schools. That's very difficult for kids to turn around and get back to where they started. The Luzerne County story will always seem extreme because of this unusual combination of an extraordinary amount of illegal money involved and this violation of 2,500 kids' constitutional rights. But the core of the story, which is about respecting the constitutional rights of kids, treating them fairly in the juvenile justice system, not punishing kids for trivial behavior, is a story that is nationwide. It's a story that we at Juvenile Law Center know goes on every day in juvenile courts across the country. So we continue to see opportunities to address this. We know that public defenders don't have adequate resources to do a good job of representing kids. We know that juvenile court remains a place where most participants in the system don't want to practice. We know that too many kids are locked up, and that's not a story that's unique to Luzerne County. The question about why the face of the justice system in the United States still looks like a face of color, it's a brown face or a black face, is one that I think is challenging for us. We know that there are points of bias within the system. that there are complicated issues about policing, where police are most present, who gets arrested, what kinds of crimes they get arrested for. We know in the juvenile justice system that the effects of the racial disparities in the system increase as kids move through the system. So if you have a higher number of kids of color being arrested, you will have an even higher percentage of kids of color who will be formally prosecuted in the juvenile justice system. And yet an even higher number, a higher percentage of those kids who will be incarcerated. So the concern that we must legitimately face about what's going on in our justice system and the disparities that people of color face and the kids of color face in particular is that it's a pervasive problem that we can't solve just at one step. We can arrest fewer kids. If we arrest fewer kids of color, we will see that will roll down the rest of the entry points of the system and the intervention points of the system, where we will continue to see fewer kids of color coming in. So it's a problem that we need to tackle at multiple stages. Certainly we need to provide more supports in communities that don't have all of the supports that they need. We need to make sure that we have strong educational systems, that we have trained police, that we have trained participants in the justice system that can make the kinds of decisions that we all want them to make. Ultimately, what we want is a system that is fair and that respects the due process rights of everybody in it.